Good morning. It's Saturday, February the 20th, and this is The Drill. Thank you very much. And the daily prayer is from Daily Declarations for Spiritual Warfare. I will be your defense and refuge. I have given you refuge in the shadow of my wings, and I will keep you in safety until a disaster has passed. My glory will be a canopy of protection for you. It will be a shelter and shade from the heat of the day, and a refuge and hiding place from the storm and rain. I am your shelter from the wind and your refuge in the storm. I will be like streams of water in the desert and the shadow of a great rock in a thirsty land. I have put my words in your mouth and covered you with the shadow of my hand. Gladness and joy will overtake you, and sorrow and sighing will flee away. I am he who comforts you. Prayer declaration. I will trust in the covering of your refuge, and in the shadow of your wings I will trust. Be my defense and refuge in times of trouble. I will sing of your strength. In the morning I will sing of your love. For you are my fortress, you are my strength. I sing praise to you, for on you I can rely. Amen. So, welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So, I want to get right to it. Here is one of the, I saw, let's see, where are we at? Let me go to Twitter. I saw on Twitter, American Conservative is a magazine that I subscribe to, and it has a lot of great articles with depth. They get below the surface of the news and get below the surface of, let's see, where are we at here? Over there. Nope, that's not what I want. What are we doing here? That's not it. Let's try this. Here we go. Lists. Here we go. Bookmarks. Don't know that that's the one. Let me see. Site pattern. Let's see. Is it down here? No. Suits, KFI. I'm really hoping. Actually, it wasn't the American Conservative. It was the Federalist. The Federalist is about. That's conservative, and that's more American. Conservative, American Conservative, American Conservative. Let's see. Seed Fund, Gentleman's Journal. Daniel Bryan Suits. No, none of that is there. So I don't understand, because I know I bookmarked this particular deal. But let's try it the different way. And as a matter of fact, whoops. Let's do this. Let us do this. Okay, so I found what it is that I'm looking for. It is in the Federalist, and it's an article written on February 18th by Jesse Kelly, and the title of it is "The First Step Towards Righting America is Refusing to Believe the Left About Anything." And I'm very excited about this article because it goes to the heart of what it is that I've been talking about for several years now. I've been podcasting about that. One of the things that you have to do is you have to disregard the left from the standpoint of believing that they have anything in terms of content to offer the United States in any way, shape, or form. So this is an article that goes into that. So, and the subtitle of this is "The Weakness and Stupidity of America's Right Has Allowed False Narratives to Cement in the Minds of the Public. It's killing our freedoms, it's killing our jobs, it's killing our families." Exactly. I've said it before, where really the only reason, what this is a battle of two incompetencies. That the only reason that we aren't Venezuela today is because the left is just a little bit more incompetent than the right. Anyway, so here we go. Did you know that you can see the Great Wall of China from outer space? Is that not absolutely incredible? I heard this cool little fact from a friend some time ago and began telling everyone I knew about this cool trivia nugget. What really blew me away was how almost everyone I had told already heard this and agreed with me that it was a very cool fact. A man-made wall you can see from space. That is just incredible. I mean, it would be incredible if it were true. You see, it is not true. Not even a little. NASA and multiple individual astronauts have debunked this myth. Yet much of the general public believes it to be a fact, as NASA points out. But why? The narrative. That is why. There is nothing more powerful and destructive in today's world than the narrative. The narrative, as I define it, is simply an assumption or set of assumptions widely accepted by the general public as facts. As we know, facts cannot be changed. That is why they are facts. This is also why it is so critical to ensure the general public gets an accurate narrative. Otherwise, if the base set of publicly observed, publicly believed facts is wrong, every step after that will also be incorrect. It's like getting swallowed up by an avalanche and digging ferociously in the wrong direction. What he's basically describing here is foundational. He's trying to say life is foundational. And you start with a foundation, and if you start with a crappy foundation, you're not going to have a solid structure on top of it. Crappy foundation, crappy structure. The weakness and stupidity of America's right has allowed false narratives to cement in the minds of its public. It's killing our freedoms, it's killing our jobs, it's killing our families, it's killing our schools, it's killing our nation. Take coronavirus, for example. Remember the beginning? Remember the mass panic pushed from every single American institution? Everyone go home and hide or millions will die. News story after news story after social media post after politician's speech hammered away at the American public. In very short order, even 90% of the people on the right were parroting the narrative that you should shut down your business and bunker down at home or everyone will die. After all, shutting down an economy is the only way to stop coronavirus, right? That's what the narrative was in the beginning, and to this day, the vast majority of Americans believe it. Of course, all that turned out to be wrong. In very short order, the left realized these lockdowns could be a very useful tool in destroying the President Trump's economy that was leading to his re-election. Where were your favorite politicians and pundits on the right in the beginning when this false narrative was being set? Remember George Floyd? I'm quite sure you do. How could you possibly forget the modern-day saint honored with more funeral services than any other human being in the history of mankind? Immediately after the man's death, everyone with a microphone or social media account was sprinting to prove how not racist they were. Outcries about cops hunting down black men for the color of their skin were heard from sea to shining sea. Every major corporation had a statement out dumping on cops and pretending America is some rancid, racist dump. Even my sons couldn't log into their video games without a special Black Lives Matter landing page. The professional athletes kneeled for the anthem, and Aunt Jemima changed its name and logo. Of course, none of this narrative, either about how Floyd's death happened or the riots that followed, were based on facts. Not a single word. Yet, where was the right? Where did we get out of the single entity with a chance to speak the truth in the face of lies? What did we get out of the single entity? with a chance to speak the truth in the face of lies. We got a federal police reform bill and GOP senators talking about the need to change military base names. Who can forget the violent insurrection at the Capitol building on the 6th? Have you not heard the government was almost taken over and 5 people were murdered? I heard it on every news channel. I read it in 1,000 articles. I saw endless social media posts about it. In fact, it was so violent and insidious, they impeached a guy who's no longer in office for it. That must be really bad, right? 5 people murdered is no joke, of course. And please stop me if you've heard this before. That is all a complete lie. Would you like to hear about the 5 murders you believe happened on the 6th? 1 man died of a heart attack. 1 woman collapsed for yet unknown reasons. 1 woman was shot and killed by a police officer. 1 man had a stroke, and 1 police officer died. As of the time of this writing, the medical examiner has been unable to prove the police officer died from any external force. There. Those are the 5 murders you believe happened. They're just as real as viewing the Great Wall of China from outer space. Yet to this day, the vast majority of politicians and pundits on the right will repeat the violent insurrection with 5 murders lie told by the left. My point here is not the lies. The left lies. All communists do. Lying is simply part and parcel of the ideology. My point is that we are in a very serious trouble right now in the United States of America. We are coming apart at the seams. The left has never been in such a position of power in our institutions, and they know it. They're aggressively trying to stamp out the opposition. Our side needs to be smarter and stronger. We need to be the adults who stand soberly by while the whole world shrieks and panics about something. We no longer have the option of writing the initial news cycle and accepting it at face value. Our failure to hold the line and speak hard truths has made the left's job of cementing a lie in the minds of the people infinitely easier. From now on, when the next major event arises, let us resolve to set the narratives ourselves instead of being consumed by it. Jesse Kelly is the host of Jesse Kelly Show on KPRC 950 in Houston. Jesse is a Marine Corps combat veteran and former congressional candidate in Arizona. He resides in the Houston area with his wife and 2 sons. This is a well-written article, and he is right about most of what he's talking about here. And again, he's approaching this from a standpoint of depth. We have a tendency to be shallow in our analysis of everything, politics for politics' sake. And again, whatever it is that comes down the pike, whatever it is that we hear from particularly right-wing sources. Hugh Hewitt is a classic example. I've been criticizing Hugh Hewitt for being all of the people on the right immediately in a situation like with Jesse or with I was going to say Jesse Smollett, but with George Floyd and all the other examples that this Jesse Kelly produced have a tendency. We listen to the right, and whatever they say, we sort of go along with. So everybody, and for instance, with the murders that supposedly happened on January the 6th, all of the right-wing people, they get their ideas of what to talk about by looking at the New York Times. So they're as influenced by the Times as anybody. They scream and yell about it and stamp their feet and say the Times is a worthless left-wing rag, but they can't stop reading it. They can't stop reading it. And they keep quoting it. Hey, I read an article in the Times. I read an article. Why? What are you doing? So there's influence. So if the New York Times comes out with big headlines about a riot in Washington, D.C., which it wasn't. There was no riot. There was a rally, and then some people decided that they were going to go to a certain portion of that rally was going to go ahead and protest at the outside where our representatives, our so-called representatives, were meeting to about the vote, the presidential election. They're meeting to certify it, that presidential election, and to protest peacefully. Now, they were let in by police officers. There's film of that to go ahead and go into the Capitol building and wander around. some of the people are seen breaking glass, breaking windows, and whatnot. And but the whole thing of this being a riot or an insurrection is simply an overreaction by Nancy Pelosi, trying to use this as some type of a political tool or weapon, trying to create enemies where she doesn't need to. But he is absolutely correct about us to resolve setting the narrative ourselves, and that is another way of saying that is framing. I've been talking about a book that I have read that I recommend to all of the people that listen to my podcast to read. There's two of them, actually. One is called The Little Blue Book of the Democratic Party, but it's a little blue book. And there's another one called Don't Think of an Elephant, both by the same author named Lakoff, L-A-C-K-O-F-F, or L-A-K-O-F-F. But anyways, and he's making the point in that book that if you want to win and you want to, in any situation, whether it's a verbal argument or it's a major nationwide campaign, you have to successfully frame the argument. An example of that is abortion. On the left, the abortionists frame the argument as right to, pro-choice, right to choose. And then the counter to that is pro-life. And this is an example where the right got it right. Instead of trying to argue the issue about whether or not women should have choice, the right went ahead and makes the issue life, right to life. And so you have those. It's basically the argument about abortion is more or less at a standstill, but that's an issue where you're framing the argument. Frame it as life. Frame it as choice. If you try to argue that women shouldn't have a choice, that's a loser. There's no way to win that argument. Same way, if they try to argue that there is no right to life, they can't win that argument. They can't win. So you have to be disciplined enough to stick to your guns. Make sure that if you're going to be discussing abortion, that you're discussing it from a right to life standpoint or within the right to life frame. Another example of this is in national elections, which is usually for president and vice president. The way it usually works is that the Democrat Party is seen as the party of compassion, that the Republican Party is seen as a party of patriotism. So it's always a battle between patriotism and compassion. And this is something that goes way back to before the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Each side tries to get the other side to argue their case within its frame. Okay, so for the left, the frame is compassion. For the right, the frame is patriotism. If the debate becomes who is more compassionate, the left is always going to win. If it goes the other way and it becomes a debate about who's more patriotic, the right is always going to win. A classic example of this is George H.W. Bush, somebody I refer to as George I, was going up against not Walter Mondale, but Dukakis. And so, of course, George W. Bush brings out the flag, and he's a patriot and patriotic, and Dukakis and his team got intimidated. Instead of continuing to campaign and try to convince the American people that the campaign should be about compassion and who's more compassionate, Dukakis tried to show to the American people, hey, I'm just as patriotic as George H.W. Bush. So what does Dukakis do? He climbs into a tank and puts on a helmet, drives around, and ends up looking ridiculous. And that was pretty much the end of his campaign. But again, he lost as soon as he decided that he had to try to prove to the American people that a Democrat could be as patriotic as a Republican. It's just not going to happen. And one where it should have gone the Democrats' way but didn't was the 2000 election with Al Gore. Al Gore and George II ended up arguing. It became an issue of compassion. George II decided to call himself the compassionate conservative. He didn't wave the flag. He didn't talk about patriotism. He had military service in the Air National Guard, but he didn't emphasize any of that, and that's a mistake. The only reason that Al Gore lost was because of a third-party candidate that siphoned off just enough votes to leave George as the winner. If it hadn't been for this guy, he wrote a book called Unsafe at Any Speed. I can't remember his name right now, but it was about the Corvair. And so, again, he siphoned off just enough votes to give the election to George Bush. Otherwise, Al Gore would have won it solidly, handily. Another example, even though George I was running a campaign for re-election and running it pretty much on patriotic lines, he lost the election to Bill Clinton because of a third-party candidate, and that was Ross Perot, who siphoned off 20%, 18 to 20% of the vote. Normally, third-party candidates don't get much more than 12, and he siphoned off 20% of the vote, and that was plenty to give Bill Clinton the victory. So unless there's a third-party candidate involved in the election, basically, again, it shapes down to patriotism and compassion as the frames for the election. So he's absolutely right here about the framing, and like he says here, so the point here is not the lies, the left lies. All communists do. Lying is simply part and parcel of the ideology. It's called pragmatism, and it's called might makes right and the ends justify the means. Back to the article. My point is that we are in very serious trouble right now in the United States of America, and part of the reason that we're in that trouble is because, again, not because of the left. The left does what it does, but because of the right, because of the way people respond or react to it. Again, Hugh Hewitt is the classic example. He believes whatever he reads in the New York Times or the Washington Post. If the Washington Post says that it was a riot, then he says, damn it, it's a riot. And furthermore, he goes so far to the left that he demands that people be prosecuted without due process of law. He was Johnny on the spot. First, as soon as this happened on the 6th, on the 7th, in the morning of the 7th, when he was having a show, first thing out of his mouth, that everybody that was involved in this should be 800 people, I think he said. He claims 800 people were involved. Where does he get that information? From the Washington Post. How do we know that? Because he works for them. He writes columns for them. So whatever they tell him, he assumes is the gospel truth. They say it's a riot, it's a riot. If they say 800 people were involved, he eats it up. And then further demands that those people be prosecuted and put in prison. Nowhere do I hear the words due process of law. Nowhere do I hear him say an investigation should be conducted. Nowhere do I hear him say we ought to take a look at Nancy Pelosi and see if she had some kind of sneaky, underhanded involvement in the situation, which later on turned out was true. That she refused law enforcement, she refused reinforcements that was offered by the president and that was demanded by her sergeant at arms. Okay, why did she refuse it? It seems to me now obvious. If things get out of control, she can always blame, make the issue the radical right and Donald Trump, et cetera, et cetera. So, but again, instead of looking into the situation first and even taking the time to say, I'm going to reserve judgment on this until all the facts are in, Johnny on the spot to say, no, these people need to go to prison. Every one of them need to be prosecuted, arrested, prosecuted, and put in prison. That doesn't sound like somebody that is conservative. It certainly doesn't sound like somebody even who claims to be center-right. And that's the way he positions himself. He's neutral, he's nothing, he's a zero. But more often than not, he actually says things that sound more socialistic than anything else. So the point is that with this riot thing, the left was able to frame the argument, frame the debate as an issue of riot and an insurrection, and the right was caught flat-footed. And there was no reason for the right to be caught flat-footed. We all saw this coming. We knew for weeks that this rally was going to be taking place on the 6th, the very day when Congress was going to be sitting down to certify the elections. We also knew that since this was no secret that this rally was going to occur, that there was the possibility that left-wing activists may decide to infiltrate and create problems. And we did find out that there was at least one of the anarchists who put on MAGA gear and the whole bit and carried a Trump flag and got in there and created mischief. So we knew that going ahead of time and had the opportunity to frame the January 6th situation first. It's like when those of you that have been that have siblings, and you know the basic rule with your parents is when you've got a complaint against your brother or sister, or they've got a complaint against you, the first one that gets to mom wins with the argument. Because the second person that gets there is going to sound like somebody that's just looking to, looks guilty, even if they have a complaint to make about you. So-and-so took my toy. And if you get there first with that, my brother took my toy argument, and then your brother comes up and says, no, he took it, it just looks like your brother is trying to shift the blame. Okay, and mom's more likely to believe you than believe your brother. So that's a good way, growing up, it's a good way to get away with something. You steal his toy and then run to mom and complain that he stole yours, kind of thing. And the same thing kind of issue goes here. If the right had gone ahead and framed the argument in the beginning, when we knew that this was going to happen, and come out and have the big shots in media, the Hugh Hewitts come out and say, look, this is going to happen on January 6th. I strongly suspect that Nancy Pelosi and the forces of the left are going to try to screw this up. They're going to try and create a mess. They may try to create riots. They may try to create some sort of an insurrection and then turn around and blame the Republicans. Or, better yet, is leave a Republican name out of it and just say, we're putting Nancy Pelosi on notice. If anything goes wrong on January 6th, we are holding her accountable. And we're holding her accountable because it is her responsibility to ensure the safety and security of the individuals and the property in Washington, D.C. So now this is preset. You say this weeks in advance and keep saying it over and over and over and over again. Then when something happens on January 6th, who's going to take the blame? It's not going to look like some wild right-wing insurrection. It's going to look like dereliction of duty and negligence on the part of Nancy Pelosi. And so that's the way the debate is going to be framed after that. So, again, he's absolutely right. It is an issue. The only reason we're not Venezuela today is because the left is more incompetent than we are. And further evidence of that is look at the governorships around the country. Look at what's going on in California. We have the Democrats run everything in the state, and and we got nothing. We don't have socialist paradise. We're not even close. They haven't even bothered to do single payer. That was one of the things that the Democrats promised. Elect us and we'll give you single payer. Where is it? They've been in office and running the state for how many years? A decade or so or longer? And they don't even have single payer? All they want to do is make a choo-choo train from Los Angeles to San Francisco? Are you serious? And then the other things that they've accomplished is banning plastic straws, banning plastic bags. Are you kidding? This is socialist paradise? No, not by a long shot. So, again, another excellent article comes out of the Federalist. Look them up on Twitter. If you're not following them, and follow them, they come out with some excellent articles along with the American Conservative. So I'd recommend that you follow both of those, the American Conservative and the Federalist, and consider subscribing to each one of them. I subscribe to the American Conservative because they do have very good in-depth. Again, most of the analysis that's done on the right, and the reason we always get caught flat-footed is because our so-called leaders, the pundits on the radio, have a very shallow view of life, that everything is politics. And so it's not. And the American Conservative and the Federalist are here to remind us of that. So that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. Be honest, be smart, and be beautiful. And until next time, I'm Ron, and that's The Drill.